Hey guys, I'm Josh Mount. You're listening to the Notes and Nerds podcast. I'm here with the legendary bassist Les Nemes with Haircut 100. How are you today?
Legendary. Wow. I've never been called legendary before.
Yeah, it's a first time for everything. Yeah.
There is. I'm going to make the best of this.
All right.
I'm going to walk around calling myself the legend from now on. Thank you.
You put that on the back of your new bass.
No, I'll stick it on a t-shirt.
There you go.
And if anyone questions it, I'll just head them towards your website, your podcast, and there it is. You said it. I didn't. So,
yeah. Well, you're one of my influences, and I first heard Haircut 100 when I was about 15, and so this would have been the mid 90s before the whole 80s surge started happening. And the reason I heard of Haircut 100, because this was pre-internet time, was Duran Duran. Nick Rhodes had mentioned Haircut 100 in an interview, so coming from them.
Did he say nice things?
Oh yeah, he goes. There were.
Cool.
It was around the time when they recorded Notorious, so this was after the breakup of their group, and they were. Nick had said, "Oh yeah, there's bands like Haircut 100 and Heaven 17 and all these other bands," and he said they were doing really good things in England at the time, and it was just around about that time, and so I went and had a listen, and after that purchased the records, and just went from there.
Hooked.
Oh yeah, it was.
Hooked to the hooks.
Totally. Absolutely. And, going into that, who were some of your major influences that, made you pick up the bass guitar in the beginning?
Well, the first one wasn't anyone famous. The first one was a bass player in a restaurant. When I cannot remember how old I was, but I can't have been very old, maybe sort of 9, 10, 11-ish. Went on holiday with the family to Hungary, to Budapest, and we were in a restaurant one night, and they had one of these little live bands.
Oh right.
The little three-piece.
Oh yeah.
With a drummer, a keyboard player, and a bass player, and I was absolutely hooked, transfixed at this bass player, because that was the first time I've ever seen a bass player live and heard a bass guitar through an amp. And it wasn't the fact that I could hear it, but you could feel it as well. That's the first time I heard that really lovely, live, deep bass sound. And from that second, I was absolutely hooked. And I thought, my God, that's what I want to do. So that was the initial thing. And then once my attention had been caught, I started listening definitely to bass lines on different records. And my brother went into the army, so he left me all his record collection, and I started listening to all those and listening to the bass on all those. And then originally it was stuff like the Four Tops and the Temptations, so obviously you're looking at James Jamerson, but it also went on to other stuff like Jimi Hendrix and Cream, so Noel Redding and Jack Bruce, and I was just steadily picking out the bass from each one of these records. And then when I got into my teens, I was nagging my mum to buy me a bass guitar, and eventually she gave in and got me one. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then I got into the funk stuff, because, well, it's a bass player's dream, all of that kind of music. So then I suppose it was people like Louis Johnson and Verdine White, Bernard Edwards. So it would be people like Louis Johnson, Verdine White, Bernard Edwards, Earl Young from the Tramps. And the one thing that really caught my ear, I think, which that would have been the 80s, was, Inside Out by Odyssey.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Now, I'm not quite sure who plays on that. I've read that it's someone called Sandy Anderson, but then other people are saying it's Mark Adams from Slave, because it's quite a similar bass line. But that opened up my eccentric side, because the bass line on that is just so off the wall, mental, with all the overdubs and the slapping things he does. And that's when I started going off and looking at slightly different, like just very individual bass players, and I got into people like Tina Weymouth, who I absolutely love and is still in my top three.
Oh yeah, like the syncopation type of bass that Barnard Edwards made quite famous.
Yeah, yeah, and that sound as well. I read an interview where he was asked what strings he used, and he said, "Oh, I don't know, the ones that came with the bass." So apparently, he never ever changed his strings ever.
Oh yeah, John Taylor from Duran Duran actually has that old Music Man now.
Oh, does he?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. He's actually used it on
Oh,
quite a few of their recordings, and he was saying in an interview recently that his bass tech was the one that actually changed the strings. He had no intention on ever
oh,
changing them.
so, oh, okay,
I don't know if he.
cool. Yeah, from there, I guess I got into the Faces, and I love Ronnie Lane because he's just, I mean, he's all over the fretboard, and not to be flash, but just because that was his style, and every one of his bass lines was just like a little song within a song. You could hum a Ronnie Lane bass line from any song because it was a melody in itself.
Oh yeah.
So I really loved his stuff, and XTC Colin Moulding.
Oh
Then I
yeah.
got really into the reggae thing with Sly Dunbar, and I love Errol Holt, who did a lot of work for Gregory Isaacs as well. So
Oh
it's a mishmash of different things, but I just love players who are individual, and I love players. I never got the whole sort of Jacko Pastorius thing. I just never got it,
yeah.
or I never got, to be on. And I don't want to offend anyone, but I never got the whole Flea thing either. When I listen to Flea, it's just a load of noise to me.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm getting old, I don't know. But these people like Ronnie Lane and Sly Dunbar and all these different, and Tina, and what I love about them is just that they're melodic and they're off the wall.
Yeah.
And I heard an interview with Tina where she was saying that she was they were trying to push her to join Talking Heads, and she always said no, 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 not interested, not interested. And eventually she gave in and said yes, and she turned up. She bought herself a bass, and that was the first time she's ever played, and she had no idea what she was doing,
Oh
but
yeah.
she just put the yeah, and I think that's wonderful because to me that's the way to learn. You just pick it up and you just play, even if you've got no idea what you're doing. Just play and take little bits of info from here and there, and talk to people, and just make it up as you go along. And I mean, she's come out with some of the greatest lines in pop music history. I think she's wonderful. So
Oh yeah.
yeah,
And being able to complement the band, I think that's the biggest thing as a bass player. Just being able to complement the song.
yeah. Know when not to play.
Right. It's that space
Know
that
when to leave a gap. Yeah,
totally. Um,
you can get the grooviest bass line with just 4 or 5 notes.
oh yeah,
It's a feel thing, you know.
yeah.
So
And from those early Haircut 100 days, I know that you were famous for using the arias. What kind of
yeah.
basses and amps did you prefer at that time?
Well, when we first started, like before we were signed, the guy who got me my first bass also got me my first bass cabinet. So he was the guy who was in the band called Blue Mink, who were really big in the 60s in London. And he used to go to the pub where my mum worked. So she obviously asked him when I was asking her for a bass. She said, like, my son really wants to start playing bass. Can you help out? And he went, yeah, sure, no worries, I'll get you something. Then I think I told you this before. One day, this huge, big 60s black Rolls Royce turned up at our house, and he jumped out
Oh
and
man.
opened up the trunk and pulled out this little jazz bass copy, and that was my first bass. But he also got me my first bass cab, which was a Vox,
Oh yeah.
and he said it was owned by the bass player of the Kinks. It was one of his.
Oh that.
And but there was no amp, so I was working part time, and I got some money together, and I just bought myself a little 100-watt Marshall,
Oh yeah.
and the two just didn't go together.
Oh yeah.
Sound wasn't fantastic, but that was my first bit of gear. When we signed and haircuts started happening, and I got the arias, and we booked the tour, the first kind of world tour. Um, I didn't really have anything, and everything I tried just didn't kick it. It just didn't give me the sound I wanted. And we even got to the stage where some of the sound crew were building me a rig out of PA parts, and even that didn't work. And so one day, my bass tech took me down to the Bass Centre in London, which was a music shop that dealt only in bass gear, nothing else, which was quite new in those days. And that was just a wonderful experience because they gave me a cup of tea and said, right, sit down, try anything you like, off you go. And I spent all day there. And that's when I discovered Trace Elliot. They'd just come out.
Oh, yeah.
And
absolutely.
so I bought that Trace Elliot rig, and that was just wow. There had been nothing like it before. It was just so groundbreaking, and sound was just absolutely amazing. But it was absolutely huge. It came in 3 flight cases, so it's not something you can stick in the back of your car and off you go.
Yeah.
But that's amazing. So at that point, I was using the Aria through a 500 watt head, cabinet on top with 2 10s, and then a big bin with an 18 at the bottom.
Oh.
And that was amazing.
Oh, yeah. And as many are pretty curious as it is now, what are you currently using? I saw that you were using a Squier jazz bass on your videos.
Yeah, I went from there. I went on to Warwick because I got the Rick Astley tour, and everything on the Rick Astley stuff is played on keyboard, all the bass parts. So I needed that low B, so I had to get a 5-string Warwick. So I got a Warwick thumb bass 5-string, and I got a Streamer 4-string because there were a couple of songs with some slap things in there, and I just found it easier to do that on the 4-string, so I'd switch for those songs. And then when I came to Spain, and the whole thing changed. I knew I wasn't going to be doing a lot of music work here. The reason we moved was because we wanted to just a nicer, calmer life for my daughter, who was about 4 years old at the time. Oh. So I met up with some people, and even up until today, we've got this little band where we just do 70s club classics, Disco Truck Brothers, Johnson, Chic, Shalimar, all that kind of stuff. And all that stuff was recorded before 5-string, so I had no need for the 5-string, and I found myself kind of hankering back to the old days. And I thought, I want to get a 4-string again. So rather than spend $2,000 on a Fender, everybody told me the Squiers are brilliant. Just buy. Yeah, everybody said just get a Squier. They're really, really good. So I've always loved the jazz bass because I like the slim neck and the way it sits, and I love the sound of it as well with the twin pickups. So yeah, I got myself a Squier bass, and I absolutely love it now. I haven't touched the Warwick for over a year.
Oh.
So everything I do now is on the Squier. So now I know that I love it. I'm looking at maybe getting another one, like Verdine, a white one with a tortoise shell pickguard and the rosewood neck.
Have you ever had any experience with a fretless bass at all, or?
I had a fretless Aria. The ones with the frets drawn in.
Yeah. Oh.
It's fretless for Jacko for beginners.
Yeah.
And I think I played it 3 times.
Oh. And
that was actually on, I don't know, when Nick released his first solo album, Whistle Down the Wind.
Oh, yeah.
That bass line is mine. And Pino just played that. He got Pino to play it note for note. And I'm not putting Pino down. Pino is wonderful. He's not only a great player, but a lovely man too. But that was my bass line, and I played that on a Aria fretless for the album that wasn't released in the end, because he took some of the songs that were supposed to be on that second Haircuts album and took them over for his first solo album, and Whistle Down the Wind was one of those songs.
Oh yeah, that was in 16 Candles, I think, during a dance scene in that movie. If I'm not mistaken.
Was it?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, talking about the days with Haircut, what was it like being famous musician in the early 80s. Was that a pretty heady time for you?
You know what? I bet it was even better in the 60s. I always said if I had a time machine, I would go back and join the Rolling Stones in 1967
Oh, yeah.
as their bass player, kick Bill out and go there and stuff. Well, what was there not to like? I mean,
Oh,
we're
yeah.
19, 20 years old. We're doing what we love doing more than anything in the world. We're getting paid to do it. We're traveling around the world and staying in great hotels, hanging out with our best mates, and girls are chasing us down the road.
Oh,
So it's the perfect life, isn't it?
oh, absolutely. That must have been a trip for you. What was your first?
It was it was great fun, and just playing, just being able to play for a living. How many people can say that they love their jobs? I'm sure you do,
Oh, yeah.
but there's not many. Anyone who I mean, I've done it here. I've done it in Spain, getting up, doing the old 9 to 5. I didn't last. couldn't, I couldn't stand it. It was like being in a prison cell.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
just to be able to play for a living and get paid to play bass guitar, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'll have some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great fun. And the 80s was, I think, the end of an era as far as bands and touring and the way people recorded and the way people played live and the way bands were handled by record companies. It was kind of the end of that era before the whole kind of X Factor generation took over, where they just knock them out one after the other now.
Yeah. It just
So
nothing really nowadays. I mean, I can name a few, but it just doesn't seem as sincere as it was in the 80s
it's
when.
yeah, it's a completely different world. It's a completely different world, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. And what was it like getting a record deal with Arista in the 1980s compared to scoring a record deal now in the current scene?
I don't think it means so much now, and I don't think it's a process. The whole music thing is not a process anymore because everything is so instant, and everyone, kids nowadays have got no patience. They just want everything and they want it now.
Right, the instinct.
Whereas when I was into music, something as simple as buying the latest album from your favorite band was a wonderful process that you went through, because first of all, you had to save up for it. So you'd work all month, and at the end of the month, when you got your wages, that's when you'd go out with your money in your hand and go down the record shop, and then you'd pick out the album you want and take it home and read all the sleeve notes and look at the photos on there, and then you would put the needle on the record and then just listen to that whole album, both sides.
Oh,
That was your evening in. And you could have evenings in with your friends where you just listened to albums all night, and that's what you did. Nowadays, they'll listen to a track, download it, and listen to half of it, and on to the next one. The beauty of it was that it was quite slow. The whole process and procedure was quite slow, and that record companies would put time and money into a band to develop a band and give them maybe 3 or 4 albums if they were lucky.
Oh, yeah.
To prove themselves and develop and stuff. Now, if you don't have a hit with your first single, you're out. See you later.
Yeah.
And I think that means that I think it means that the younger generation don't value music. They don't have to pay for it for a start because they can get it free from anywhere.
Yeah.
So if you don't have to pay for something, then it has no value. So they just don't value the whole thing as much as we did when we were young. I think that's the major difference.
Yeah, that was. I mean, buying records even now. I just feel like I'm a teenager again. Like when I bought Paint and Paint and Pelican West with the bonus tracks on it. With the 12-inch mixes. That was
maybe that's why vinyl's making a comeback, because that whole process really is a lovely thing. It's a discovery, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is.
And I don't think you can. Digital music is just so clinical and horrible. There's nothing like just putting on a vinyl and hearing the analog sound and the scratches and the whole sort of ambience of it. That's how it was recorded. So to digitalize it onto an MP3 or whatever, it just completely destroys the whole original recording process, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And when you recorded Pelican West and Paint and Paint, was that done in separate rooms, or did you have the whole band in the studio and did it that way?
Well, that's weird after what I said, because Pelican West was one of the first albums to be recorded digitally on the new 3M master tapes. We went to the Roundhouse, and that was, I think it was the first digital studio in London. So we were one of the first to do it digitally. And it was really good for dropping in if you make a mistake, going back to that point and dropping in cleanly so you can repair mistakes and stuff. But it was still a little bit clinical. The process, we would usually just go in with Blair, myself, and Nick and run through the songs and record them, hit the tape and do how many ever takes you needed to do. But the first thing you were looking at was getting the drums right.
Right.
So for every track, that process was just to get a really good drum track out of it. And if Blair was happy, then we'd move on to the next one. And then we would come back and then overdub all the parts afterwards. But as long as the drum track was good, you could put everything else on top at a later date. So that was the point. We did do a couple of one-offs. I think October is Orange.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That was a one take. If you look at the vinyl, where the record ends, where it goes in towards the label, there's a little inscription on there that says "One take memes."
Oh, yeah.
And Bob Sargent scratched that onto the original pressing because I did that in one take. And that was me and Blair in one take.
Oh, very nice.
Like, mental.
Absolutely. And then moving on from Haircut 100, like you said previously, you'd performed with Rick Astley. How was that experience for you? Was that?
Well, that was all. That was really good because we were getting paid stupid money to do it.
Oh, that's always good.
Which is great. And you could just have all the best parts of being a professional musician without all the annoying stuff. The having to do 50 interviews a day and be here at that time and be here at that time, and the onus was all on you as the what they call in England the turn, which is the star. Whereas the band, we had the days off, we'd do whatever we want to do in these wonderful cities like Tokyo or out in America or whatever. We'd spend the day doing what we wanted, and then in the evening you turn up, do a sound check, have a lovely meal, play a great gig, and you're off to the next place the next day and you're getting paid. So I liked it. I liked that whole sort of session thing. And it was a really good band too. And Rick was an amazing singer. Really good.
Oh, yeah.
The voice that came out, there was hardly any effort. And he always sang really, really well every night. Yeah, so I really enjoyed that. That was like 2 years. And after that time, you sort of, you get to know each other, all the members of the band, you become good friends, and, it's good.
Oh, absolutely.
I've had itchy feet recently. I'd like to go on a tour. Quite like the idea of going on a tour with someone now.
Oh, yeah, have you?
But, no, this isn't the right place to be. I need to get myself somewhere where, somewhere a little bit bigger, like London or LA or somewhere like that.
Yeah, if you come out to the U.S., I'm sure, with your resume and your history, I'm sure you'd have no problem.
You think?
Oh, yeah.
You think?
Absolutely. With the 80s resurgence, I think you would, honestly think that you would have a very good shot of just, blowing up here, because I know a lot of bands that, if my own band included, if we had, a guest musician, like yourself on our album, man, that'd just be out of this world.
What about girls? Are there loads of girls?
Oh, usually.
Okay, I'm in.
All right. Sounds good. You have a deal.
Yeah, I was toying. I've been thinking about just kind of selling up a few things and just heading out to America for a few months to see what happened. But it's just that first step is a little bit scary.
Oh yeah, new place
Um,
where you're not used to.
yeah, and
And
I'm not quite sure if it's as easy as that these days. Is it just to turn up at an airport and say I'm coming in? Don't they like ask loads of questions and you have to go through this big sort of rigmarole through hoops now if you want to go into America? It's a lot more difficult than it used to be, I think.
yeah, I think just mainly because of what has happened in the past,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
that kind of puts a damper on it. But I think if you were here with like a work visa or something of that sort, I think it would work out in your favor. But and then
That's something I will look into this year for sure.
yeah, absolutely. Um, and with the bass lessons coming out that'll soon to be released on your YouTube site and then an official site eventually. What inspired you to start providing bass lessons and showing some of your legendary bass lines from Pelican West and Paint and Paint? What?
there's that legend thing again.
Oh
um, I think it goes back a little bit to what I was saying earlier about how I was working here because there was no music work, so I was taking the day job thing, and so often I would only last about 2 or 3 months in a job where I just thought I can't do this anymore. I just that whole politics you get in an office environment where people give themselves a badge and they think they're saving lives, and
no, I
I
totally.
just couldn't hack it, So now that my daughter she's moved back to London, she's grown up, she's doing her own thing, she's got a nice job, she's happy, and I'm single.
Oh.
I thought, yeah, I've got no one to answer to now, so I could earn decent amount of money but hate my job, or I could earn a little bit less money but do something that I love doing instead. So I chose the second option. So part of that was teaching, and my friends, I've got a couple of friends who teach guitar and drums at the local international school up the road, about 20 minutes away. And they loved the idea, the school loved the idea of having, as you say, a legend
Oh yeah.
come along and teach bass. So I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. And I don't actually work for them or get employed by the school, but they give me a room once a week, and I started teaching. I started teaching about 2 years ago, and I got a few students, and it's just really nice, really rewarding. One of them, they always say whenever they first come in, I say, so why bass? Who do you like? Who do you want to sound like? And all that kind of thing. And they always come up with Flea, God's sake.
Oh.
So I started introducing them to some of the 70s icons that I mentioned earlier. And there was one particular time where I played September to one of my little students. He was only about 13. He'd never heard it before. And his eyes lit up and he just went, wow, that's amazing. So when I saw that, I thought, right, that's it now. I've got to do this. I have to introduce all these young players to all these classic bass players from my youth. And so that was that. And then I took it a little bit further and looked at online courses, and I just noticed that there was a real lack of anybody doing courses for absolute beginners, for people who have just opened the box and they're taking the bass out of the box for the first time. And I noticed on a lot of bass forums on Facebook, there were a lot of players like that who were asking the most simple questions and they weren't getting answered, because I think, I don't know why, but I think that a lot of bass players haven't got time to answer them. They think it's beneath them or something. I'm not quite sure why. So I saw a little niche there, and I'm also not a big fan of endless music theory or scales, or I just don't think it's necessary. I think for sure every player that I absolutely love did it the old school way, which was just pick up a bass and play.
Yeah.
And if you get it wrong, it doesn't matter. And the first thing you need to do as quickly as possible is to join a band. Absolutely. And start playing with other musicians. And like I said earlier, just ask questions, get little hints, watch other players, talk to other players. That's the way to learn bass. So I wanted this course just to be something that I can give them basic information about, left-hand technique, right-hand technique, the notes on the fretboard, and tell them about my experiences and what I did, and then stop it there and say, right, now you have all of this info. That is enough info for you to now go off on your own and become the player that you want to be, become an individual.
Absolutely.
And I don't think there's any courses doing that. So many courses rely heavily on this theory stuff, and I'll get my head chopped off by other musicians for saying this, but I just think too much theory is like, it stems your flow, because in the back of your head, all the time you're thinking, well, this isn't musically right. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Whereas I think the music is all about expression, and
absolutely,
the best way to express yourself is to have no rules. Just do what you want.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a bad bass player. Every bass player will play to their best ability at that point. Absolutely. No bass player says, you know what, I'm going to play really badly tonight just to spite myself.
Yeah.
So it's not about good or bad. And if somebody's faster than you or technically better than you, it's probably because they've been playing longer. But that will be you soon as well. All you have to do is play. And that's what I did. I had no idea what I was doing, and I was playing bum notes everywhere. And that's what Tina Weymouth did. We spoke about it earlier.
Yeah.
But look at her. She's just fantastic.
Oh,
all you need is a bit of confidence, a little bit of help, some advice, some technical info, and then off you go. So that's what I wanted the course to be, like really, really simple, and then encourage them to just do their own thing.
Absolutely. And you have this course available on YouTube. How would people go about finding that?
Well, the YouTube thing are just freebies, because the course I'm going to charge for, because I've never had much confidence about myself, and I've never thought that I had anything really to offer. And then when I first joined Facebook and I started getting messages from all these people, like complete strangers, telling me, what a great bass player you are, you influenced me, you did this, you are the reason I picked up bass. And
yeah.
And I was like gobsmacked. I was like, really?
Oh yeah.
You got the right, you got the right bloke and the right band. But yeah. So not that recently, I decided I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to put myself down, and I'm going to value what I do, because obviously there are some other people out there who value it. So why shouldn't I?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I decided that the course I'm going to charge for, it's going to be really affordable.
Right.
But this is how I make my living now, or one of the ways I make my living. So, I have to charge.
Right.
So the YouTube things are just little freebie giveaways that I do every now and then. There's one thing called A Little Bit on the Side, which is where I will spend 10 minutes on video where I'll pick a song or a bass line that I really, really love and just break it down and talk about why is it so good? What is it that makes me feel so good about this? And then do a very quick walkthrough so that people, if they want to, can learn the song. So I've done September, Verdine, White, and a couple of others, and the next one's going to be Tina Weymouth's bass line on Cities.
Oh, real nice.
Talking Heads song Cities, that's one of my favourite. The feel and groove on that is just amazing.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's other little freebie videos where I do walkthroughs of all the haircut stuff. So I'm picking one every week. And Love Plus One I did the other day. Now, it's taken me 37 years, but I've explained the bass line for Love Plus One. So there's, I'll eventually get, week by week, I'll get to all of them from Pelican West and the Paint to Paint album as well.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite albums, is the Paint and Paint album. That album there, once I first heard it, I was just blown away by just all the musicianship on there, and just hearing your bass grooves and the way Blair was backing you up, and having Mark on vocals and his Latin percussion, and then Graham on the guitar. That for me was just amazing.
Well, that was a really horrible time for us, because we were at the point where we just spent a year in court trying to get out of the BMG deal. because
Oh.
it wasn't any good for us. It would have absolutely stifled us. So we needed to get out, and we sold more or less everything but our mothers to do that.
Oh
And we
no.
were back to square one, and we were under pressure because by then Nick had proved himself, but now
Right.
eyes were on us to do the same. So
Oh
we
yeah.
had to come up with something, and we auditioned a lot of singers because we obviously didn't have a singer, and none of them really worked out. Some of them were absolutely hilarious. There was one guy who turned up who was deaf in one ear,
Oh no.
so he had to listen to the song with his good ear. But if you spoke to him while he was listening, he couldn't hear you because his bad ear was facing you.
Oh.
That was anyway. So we decided that you can't really replace Nick Haywood in Haircut 100. So
Yeah.
one of us is going to have to sing, and the only one that's ever done any singing before was Mark, because
Oh.
he did some of the backing vocals live and in the studio, and he really, really didn't want to do it, but there was no choice.
Right.
So he said, okay, I'll give it a go. And we signed to Polydor and went into Jacob's studios and recorded the Paint Paint album there. And we'd kind of been going through our ideas over the year that we were in the court case with BMG, but we didn't record anything because we weren't allowed to, because if we did, then they would have owned it straight away because we were still under contract to them. So we did have quite a lot of ideas, and at that point we'd done a lot of live work. I think we'd done 2 European tours, American tour. We played live a lot, so I think we were all at our peak there,
Yeah.
and as a band together. So I think everybody did a really good job. I think it's something that we can be proud of.
Absolutely.
Technically and musically, I think we all played really well. And Graham had to take over all the guitar duties that he had shared with Nick before.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he did an amazing job. I think he did really well. His sound and his grooves and everything were really great. So, yeah, I'm quite proud of that. And I did hear from a photographer who has a studio in New York, and I can't remember his name, and we went there while we were in New York. He told us that whenever Michael Jackson or Diana Ross went in the studio, they always asked for that album to be played because they loved it, which is pretty special, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I'm very proud of that. I think I played much better on that than the Pelican West for sure.
I mean, and how was that first trip to America for you? I mean, was it quite a shock for you?
Well, I think it's the same as everybody who comes from little old England, and I think it's the same for anyone who comes from little old England, and you know, first time in their lives gets off a plane at New York or California or wherever, Los Angeles, wherever you're landing, you just think, wow, because you've grown up watching this culture all your life really on TV, and suddenly you're there, and it's just amazing.
Oh, yeah.
You are so lucky. You have the most beautiful country in the world to live in, and you have everything from coast to coast. You can go skiing, you can go swimming, you can sit on the beach, you can go in the forest, anything you want is within your borders. It is just the most beautiful country.
Oh, yeah.
I would love to end up there one day. I would love to live there. I could see myself living there. So yeah, it was really exciting and everything you'd expect. A little bit like the Stevie Wonder, New York,
Yeah.
skyscrapers and everything.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was cool. And getting into those, you've seen things like you watch Taxi with Danny DeVito, and now you're in one of those big yellow taxis. And yeah, it was fantastic. And the audience was so cool too, because they would really get into it. And we'd often get, you guys are great. You're going to play all night?
Oh,
it was
yeah.
fantastic.
Oh, totally. Did that I saw?
Nice girls too. The
Oh.
girls. Wow.
Oh yeah, we got
The Beach Boys. The Beach Boys were right. California girls.
Oh, absolutely. What was it like being on the Dick Clark show? I saw an interview on YouTube.
Yeah, that was crazy, wasn't it? With everyone whooping in the audience. Woo!
Yeah.
I think is that filmed on the West Coast or the East? What was that?
I believe the West Coast. I think wasn't he from
right,
California?
okay.
I'm not
Yeah,
sure. It might have been New York. It's one of the two.
See, I Yeah, it had to be one of the two because I remember that um, on that trip we were in a situation where we just done a sound check and we couldn't get out of the venue because there was all these people just hanging around for us, and we actually had to have a police escort to get us out of there and back to the hotel.
Oh,
I remember
man.
rightly, and that's when it first started happening for us out there. And I'm sure if we hadn't split up and gone back, if we had gone back the next time we went back, we would have been doing the big places like, Duran were doing. We would have had the same kind of success
Oh, yeah.
because everyone in the States really welcomed us. It was lovely. It was wonderful.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, 30 odd years on, there's still people buying Pelican West
I
and
know.
paint. I mean, how does that?
As long as they,
Yeah.
well, as long as they don't want their money back, I'm fine. They can keep buying it.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you have to worry about that. I mean, your fan
Okay.
base seems pretty stout and stellar. So,
Yeah, we never quite did this whole sort of 80s thing that every other band seems to have done, apart from Duran.
yeah,
Apart from Duran, everyone else seems to have done this thing, but we never quite got it together to do it.
yeah. Do you have any students that are gigging now because of your bass lessons, or?
No, they're all quite young. They're
Okay.
all really early. But what they do have at the school is 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 events a year where they put on these concerts where all the music students form little bands
Oh, okay.
and they get up on stage and they play a couple of songs, either original songs or covers or whatever.
Right.
And it's very, very professionally done. They have a proper PA system there. They have a sound man there because this is like a private school, so they've got a bit of cash.
Oh,
They have a
absolutely.
proper PA system, stage, lighting, everything. And so a lot of my little students have done those, and they've got into bands and they played along, and they're absolutely hooked now. They love the whole sort of being in a band thing.
Absolutely. And I saw on Facebook that you did a gig a while back. What kind of gigs do you prefer? More intimate settings, or?
Well, there's nothing here really. The whole sort of the worldwide crash thing hit Spain really bad, and especially down here on the coast as well. I mean, it's recovering now, but there's nothing near as much as far as live venues are concerned as there was when we first got here.
Absolutely.
So there's only a few clubs, and they're all really small. They're very intimate, maybe maximum 200 people or something. But they're very cool. The vibe in them is really good.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't do it professionally now. We just do it when we can get the chance to all get together.
Yeah, kind of.
And the one that's given us most work at the moment is the thing we call Disco Inferno, which is the 70s covers thing.
Oh, very nice.
Like I said earlier, the Brothers Johnson, Stomp, we do Keep the Fire Burning, Gwen McCrae, we do Shallow Our Stuff, we do September, Earth, Wind and Fire, we do all these really great club classics.
Oh, very
And
nice.
as you know, that's a bass player's dream, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And you're kind of to me at least, you were kind of the king of the funky bass lines, from the early
Well,
80s. I'd never heard anything like it.
I'm sure Noel Rodgers would have something to say about that.
Oh, I can, but yeah,
I love that style. I love it.
and
So
I
I suppose if you love something, you make more of an effort to do it well, I guess.
absolutely, and just seeing, I watched that Bands Reunited on YouTube the other day, and just seeing.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah, I bet. What was that like, getting in front of all those fans again and having,
No, it's cool. It's lovely. There's nothing. It's always lovely to. I always said that the one place I'm more comfortable than any other place is being on stage with that fan. It just feels really, really right.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, it's a real shame that we can't get it together to do something else, So, but there you go. That's the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be something I know now with, your fan base and everything. I know that, if Haircut 100 did decide to come back and, and do a worldwide tour as if it were to come to fruition. I know you'd have a really good turnout, most
I
definitely.
think, yeah, I think we would. I think we would in America and Japan, because we never really went to Japan. We never did that whole thing. But when I went, would have been '89 when we went to Japan with Rick Astley. I actually had people waiting for me at the airport and not Rick Astley. Can you believe that?
Oh man, how was
They
that
had
for you?
old hair. That was weird. They had old haircut albums and pictures and stuff that, we came out and there's all these fans, and Rick's thinking, oh, here we go, and they weren't there for him.
Yeah.
They were there for me, which was hilarious. But yeah, we could definitely do it again. What's going to happen, I think, is Nick's going to have to stop telling fibs, and then maybe we can get it together.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he's said a couple of interesting things in interviews recently that are not quite true. So.
Yeah, I heard those things too, and I wasn't sure if that was, just to maybe please the interviewer or to,
I don't know. There's always two questions to get asked, and I've heard a few. I bear him absolutely no malice. I am so happy that he's doing well with the solo stuff, and he seems really, really happy. I think he's living out in San Francisco now. He's got this girlfriend that he loves, and the album went down really well, and he's making a living out of being a musician, which is fantastic. I honestly mean that. But whenever I've seen some interviews recently, I read some stuff as well, there's always two questions that get asked. First one is, why did the band split up? And the second one is, will you get back together and do the 80s thing like everyone else is doing? And he always seems to give the same two answers. And I don't mean this in a bad way. This is literally what is being said. And he says his answers are that the first question was that we threw him out of the band. And the second question is that he would love nothing more than to get back together and go on tour. But we are the reason that doesn't happen. And I've kept my gob shut for so long. I really need to put this straight. Firstly, put yourself in this position. Can you imagine being in a band that's had a #1 album? They've just come off a very successful UK and American tour. They've had hit singles. They're halfway through recording the second album, which has gone double platinum before it's even been finished. Do you think that band would think it would be a great time to get rid of their lead singer?
No, absolutely not.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Why would we do that? It's ridiculous. And even if we did want to do that, do you think the record company would go along with it and think, yeah, guys, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Kick out your songwriter and your frontman.
Yeah.
So that is absolutely not true. Secondly, the thing about us with the Reform thing, every time the call has gone out, and it's gone out quite a few times, we have always been there. Always. Mm-hmm. To the point where the last time we actually went into the studio and started recording new material, backing tracks for brand new songs, because the plan was to record some new material and go on tour.
Yeah, absolutely.
And does that sound like people who are not interested?
Yeah.
I actually flew from Spain twice to be there. Does that sound like someone who's not interested in doing it?
Just, it sounds like you were really, intent on that happening and coming to fruition, and that just sounds like dedication straight up, that just.
Well, the whole thing. I mean, he always said it has to be natural. I can understand that he was saying that he doesn't want to be responsible for doing it, and I absolutely understand that. He just wants to do what we do, which is turn up and play.
Yeah.
And that's fine, if that's the way you want to do it. I can't see it ever happening, because I don't think we'll ever resolve this, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And we're also in a situation where everyone's doing other things now.
Right.
Although, if there was some really good, serious offer, we would all, prick our ears up. Oh. And I think that he's also in a position where he doesn't need to do it.
Yeah.
So, he's doing okay, and that's fine. That's wonderful, and that's great. Yeah. But don't say things that are not true.
Right, absolutely.
You know.
That,
There, that's done, and I'll never speak about it again. Done.
Okay. There we go. End right there. Is there anything
Okay.
else you wanna throw out there? Or?
No, I need a girlfriend.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
put you,
I've decided now. I'm got to a point now where I need a girlfriend before I get to this next stage, which might be the Zimmer frame stage, and then it's too late, isn't it?
right.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, Les, it's been a pleasure talking with you, and you giving us time here, and we really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. And
Okay.
thank you for listening to the Notes and Nerd podcast. If you want to help support us here at Notes and Nerds, you can go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/notesandnerds. If you want to buy our merch like t-shirts and totes, go to shop.notesandnerds.com. I'm Josh Mount. This has been a Notes and Nerds podcast. Thanks for tuning in.